speaking of which, we should probably transition to one of the ones that you mentioned that you just recently re-binged, and that triggered me to go back to season 1 and watch Supernatural again. And all I kept thinking was how much I abandoned Supernatural unfairly, and I watched the show Grimm, and it kind of ended up being this amalgam in my head of these sort of great, sort of, for lack of a better term, supernatural shows. And what I miss so much, Jim, I miss so much the standalone episode. I could just watch an episode. Like, it was okay for the story to stop and it be a self-contained story. There's an overarching seasonal little plots and threads, which is what makes it smart. But I didn't, it's not now. It's like, oh crap, I got to sit through 5 or 6 hours of a show to watch a show, and it's like, oh my gosh, do I really want to commit that much time to something? And I think this is one of the biggest things that streaming has changed, right?
Yeah, because they expect you to binge quite often, so that they'll either, hand out the episodes one at a time, or they'll dump everything, and you're kind of expected to watch them all, and that is pretty much the optimal way to watch them, because otherwise you're going to forget details and things that happened that are necessary to understanding the plot. I've been trying to think recently what was the first sort of big series to really do that.
Abandon the standalone episodes.
Yeah, abandon the standalone episodes. So I was thinking back. I think Babylon 5 had planned out arcs over its series, but there were still standalone episodes. But there was a plan. So that may be the start of it, but not in a bad way. So then I'm trying to think, where did it transition to becoming not a positive to have some idea of what was going on overall?
I know it was a really big deal when Netflix first started dropping like their own stuff, and it was like, oh no, all 8 episodes are there, and you're like, what do you mean all 8? I think the first initial response was what I think that even carried over into like the first season of Stranger Things. I think it was still sort of shocking that the whole season was being dropped. You're like, what? Like, oh no, all of Daredevil is there. What do you mean? I'm like, no, I have like 13 hours to watch now. What? This is strange. So, no, I don't think I could put my finger on it. Well, what took you back to Supernatural? Why? What got you back? Listen, I haven't watched this in a while. I need something good, or is there some other motivation?
So, during COVID, obviously, my wife's been working at home, so she's kind of taken over the lounge. So I have to work in the bedroom with the smaller TV. So I'm working away, and it gets boring in there. So I just put on something, anything. And I'd only caught a couple of episodes of Supernatural before, here and there, an episode here and there. Like you say, it was standalone, so that wasn't a big issue. And then I thought, oof, there's 15 seasons of this. I can just put that on and have it there playing away while I'm working. But then I got caught up in it. So, yeah, it worked its magic. I mean, it's not a hugely sophisticated show or anything, but it does what it does very well.
No, I mean, we could easily switch scripts between Grimm, which came out, I mean, like years later. I don't know if you ever watched you've seen Grimm, right?
Yeah, I've seen that. I loved that.
Yeah,
how
Grimm's
could I not
fantastic,
with my name?
especially the first couple of seasons. Of course, I knew. Obviously, I knew. But and the first season of Grimm is so rewatchable. Like I know that it peters out and has the longevity issues. Stuff wasn't planned. Writers leave, creators leave, whatever. Fine, but no, it's the same. It's the same sort of structure, the same sort of episodic storytelling, interesting mystical creatures, and I think, and maybe Grimm is a good sort of experiment to examine, because I think by the time you got to like the season 3 or whatever, they did have more of that. They kind of had standalone episodes, but so much more was threading together, and it was like, I want to go back to the standalone episodes. That's when this was really a lot more fun.
Take us back to Monster of the Week.
you making me realize I haven't seen any Supernatural for a really long time, and I watched. I've watched. I wouldn't say I watched every single minute of every episode, but definitely the first 11 to 12 episodes. And it was like a lot of fast forwarding. I'm just my ADD. I've seen this before, but really enjoyed it. Really enjoyed it. I was like, man, this was fun TV. And I hate that we have to say it that way, but that's what's missing in so much of entertainment is, can I just have fun for a change? Isn't Supernatural just fun for you, Jim? I mean, is it for me?
Yeah, it is fun. But I can't help but sort of examine things. Bit more detailed. So a lot of it is, yeah, reminiscent of these other supernatural shows. Whether it be, I mean, I detected shades of Kolchak the Night Stalker in it,
Mm.
particularly around the angel Castiel. He struck me as a bit of a combination of Kolchak and Columbo much of the time, and it's also a very unapologetically masculine take
Mm.
on,
Yeah.
on the genre, kind of the equal and opposite of Buffy in a lot of ways.
Mm.
I felt. Now, when I was quite small, we used to have reruns of the Dukes of Hazzard play on British television, and it had a lot of the same energy that had as well. You know, centering around the car, two guys getting into
Mm.
scrapes every week. You know,
Yep.
that sort of thing. So it took me back to that, and even the same sort of formula as the A Team in a lot of ways.
Sure.
You know, rolling into town. There's a problem. You
Solve the
solve it.
problem. We wrap it up,
Yeah,
but we keep moving.
wrap it
Yeah.
up, move on because you're being pursued, or
Yeah.
you know you're breaking the law or whatever. So it was nice to have that, but at the same time, over the course of the seasons, I did feel that Sam and Dean developed as characters in a way that perhaps
Mhm.
the older '80s shows, the characters tended to be quite static
Yeah,
and
that's true.
didn't change over.
Especially for the ones that you mentioned. I think what didn't stay static would probably be more in line with the more of the dramatic shows. There's a big separation back there between like an action or a comedy. A Team and Love Boat. Those are the kind of thing. But
Yeah,
then when you have a show like Dynasty, there is Dallas. They would evolve, even though they also had a very they were threaded together, but you could just watch an episode or you could skip episodes and not be lost. Like it was okay to miss Dynasty or Dallas for a week or two. You'd be okay. But you could
yeah,
definitely tell there's a massive amount of evolution and change though. TV was just so different. And yeah, it's interesting examining the different eras too when you said that because it made me think about um, how much you looked forward to watching TV. Like, it's like we take for granted this stuff's just on 24/7. You can just find it somewhere.
yeah,
I was at work. I listened to a Loki show and they were talking about Highlander. And I'm like, man, I have not watched Highlander in a while. I didn't have it on my phone. So I just went through all the different apps and it's for free on this one. I was like, oh, okay, there it is. And I was like, I didn't have to worry
yeah,
about having it with me. And it's like, so we're so spoiled. Whereas, rewind to our childhood, and it was like, oh my gosh, it's almost 8 o'clock. I got to go in. I got to get cleaned up. The shows are going to be on. Pick a night because
yeah.
that's what was, pick a night. And it was like, you didn't miss shows because it was an event. It was a thing. Now we're just spoiled. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
crazy.
and you get these weird associative memories
Yes.
because a show was on at a particular time, like
Mhm.
Saturday morning cartoons,
Yes.
or
Yes. Sunday night Disney for us.
yeah, or
Um,
a weeknight eating tinned
yeah.
ravioli and watching Robin of Sherwood on the TV. You
Right.
know,
Right.
it's
Yeah.
stuff like that.
Yeah. I was just talking about that too, where you're we had this sort of I call it the Nexus era. It's like this age 10 to age 25 where we're first experiencing different things. It's music and entertainment, relationships. You're maturing. You're going through puberty. You're experiencing these milestones in your education and in your growth and development. And many times these things overlap. And you're like, well, the first time I snuck into a movie, it was this one. And then I took on my first date was in this one. And the first time I
Yeah.
did this was in college. And those things tend to hold almost like extra credit in your love, in your passion for it. You give like bonus points. For me, it's like
Hmm.
a movie like Tron. A movie like Tron gets bonus points because it was a special movie at the time. It wasn't, in Jaws. It was like this movie that I saw. I mean, I know it's a classic to everyone else, but I just remember being scared out of my loving mind because I saw it for the first time. I think I was like 6. My aunt took me because she was my babysitter. Wasn't supposed to take me to see it. Took me to see it. I was scared, but I had the reverse response where I was so scared I wanted to see it again. And
Hmm.
that's what the association is like. I was able to overcome, in hindsight, as an adult, I understand. I was able to overcome my fear, go face it, grow up a little bit, realize movies are not real. You know what I mean? It's like
Yeah.
we have these associations, like you say. Do you think that still exists to some extent? I mean, how do you think that applies now, where everything is so 24/7 and ubiquitous?
Yeah. It's It's something I comment on quite often when I talk with. I have a podcast with a woman called Rachel Haywire, who used to be big in the industrial music scene and the sort of cyberpunk transhumanism movement. And quite often we end up discussing that there aren't really youth movements anymore. There aren't waves. There isn't an equivalent to the punk scene of the late 70s, early 80s. There isn't the equivalent of a goth scene. Kids, which is great in one way but bad in another, they just seem to be able to, grab music or fashion like a buffet. There's not these waves, these movements that we used to have. I think maybe the last one there was maybe emo.
Okay.
That to me is the last readily identifiable youth movement that we've had. So you don't seem to see these same waves and associations and sort of tribal identities in that way. Like I still would identify myself as a goth or an industrialist because I spent those formative years listening to that music, going to the Electric Ballroom in London, all of those things, and dressing a certain way. But I just don't see that anymore. So I think that's missing, and you don't get many of those common cultural experiences either. Maybe the closest thing we've got has been when some Netflix series has gone big, like Stranger Things. Perhaps everyone watched it, everyone talks about it, but that happens less and less often. There's not the same "Who Shot JR" moment.
No, you're right. I mean,
Yeah. Right?